Magic. I am a wizard! History. I'm an old wizard! The magic historian. My bones hurt. Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles. My friends, I hope the day finds you well because we have gathered to take a look at some Capenna Commander spoilers. So let's dive right in with the card that is already up on the screen. Agent's Toolkit. This has a lot of fun flavor to it, right? Because this is an artifact clue. It costs 1 blue, 1 green, and 1 to put out. It enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter, a flying counter, a death touch counter, and a shield counter on it. Obviously, when it comes to New Capenna, there is a heavy counter theme, and I have to say, it's one of the themes from the set that I am enjoying the most. So, the Agent's Toolkit also says, whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may move a counter from Agent's Toolkit onto that creature. Now, I like the fact that this isn't legendary, right? You can actually have multiple of these out, and it's like a build your own monster toolkit, right? It's a fun idea. It actually kind of makes me think of the concept that they build Ikoria as, like make a big crazy beast, right? And that's where we actually saw these ability counters. And in my opinion, that was the biggest contribution that Ikoria brought to the game. Having counters that literally have abilities imbued into them specifically instead of caring about the card they come from. And by that, I mean, we used to get cards that would say, put a tickle counter on this creature, and for every tickle counter, do X, right? You have to actually have this out to gain the tickle abilities. Whereas in nowadays, we would just straight up have the tickle counter, and you could put it on a creature, and now it's a tickler. So in this case, you have Flying Death Touch, a shield counter, and a +1/+1 counter to choose from. So you get 4 different abilities to move across, and then once you've used up all the counters, it also counts as a clue, so you can sack it to draw a card. So once it theoretically becomes a dead card, then you can feed it into your graveyard. And if you have ways to keep recurring it and bringing it back, you can get a lot of craziness going on. And I just like the idea of this toolkit where depending on the scenario that you're dealing with, you're going to use different tools. You can see there's an angel feather in there. You can see there is a vial of halo, and then it becomes a little more nebulous in terms of the artwork as to what exactly is in this toolkit. So it's interesting to me to know specifically which one of these would be the halo, right? Because halo does a lot of things in the story, but I don't think that it makes you fly, and I doubt that it gives you death touch. So I'm guessing shield or +1/+1 counter. But either way, that's one of the things that I like about cards like this, is trying to figure out exactly what corresponds to what. Now, let's move on to Storm of Forms. I love the name, first of all. Storm of Forms feels great as a name. 1 blue and 3 for an instant that says, when you cast this spell, copy it for each kind of counter among permanents you control. You may choose new targets for the copies. Now, I like this because it cares about the specific counters as opposed to caring about the actual different permanents that have the counters, right? So for example, the Agent's Toolkit that we just looked at would count as 4 different kinds of counters, regardless of whether they were on the Agent's Toolkit or you would spread them amongst your other creatures, right? So just having Agent's Toolkit out would set Storm of Forms to 4. And it says, return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. So basically, for each type of counter you have, you're going to get an additional bounce. So if you just had Agent's Toolkit out, you would cast the original spell of this, you would get 4 copies of it for each of the counters, and in total, you would be bouncing 5 non-land permanents, right? So obviously, this is never going to be on the level of Cyclonic Rift. I don't know if we'll ever see bounce that is that powerful in Commander because the Rift is absolutely insane. But this is an interesting build. Like, this is an interesting build around it concept where if you can get enough counters, you can gain a serious board wiping ability here, right? The art is very interesting to me, although I will admit, I'm not 100% sure what's going on because you can see somebody in what looks like a cyclone of like scrolls or whatever. So I assume that this is just supposed to be a cyclone of scrolls that pulls these non-land permanents up and pulls them out of existence. But I will admit that it doesn't feel like a storm of forms, right? Is this guy changing? Oh no, you know what? Never mind. I take that back. I did not notice that his one hand was changing into a paw. So I guess the idea is you get pulled up into this tornado, your form is constantly changing until you basically just evaporate away into nothingness. It's a pretty crazy concept. All right, you know what? I like that better now that I see the more subtle flavor aspects. When it comes to these original spoilers, sometimes the images that I'm working off of are pretty small and I can't see all of the details, unfortunately. But let us move on to the next card that we're going to talk about, and that is Contractual Safeguard, bringing back an Azorius ability. 1 white and 2 for an instant that has Addendum, which is an ability originally associated with the Azorius, but now also is being handed off to the brokers, because you can see in the background of the card the broker's watermark, right? So Addendum is, if you cast this spell during your main phase, put a shield counter on a creature you control. That's how Addendum works. As long as you do it during your main phase, you get an extra bonus. And you don't have to do it at sorcery speed. You can still cast it at instant speed as long as it's during your main phase. So you can't use it the same way as a combat trick. You have to kind of be upfront about it. And that falls into the Azorius flavor of basically setting rules ahead of time that have to be obeyed, as opposed to springing rules upon you at the last second. And the brokers do kind of inhabit the same flavor in a way where most of them, when they're obeying their rules, are getting people to agree to sign contracts so everything is above board, right? So the idea also of putting a shield counter on a creature you control makes perfect sense, because the brokers are about that style of protective magic. Now, the rest of the card says, choose a kind of counter on a creature you control. Put a counter of that kind on each other creature you control. So this is pretty solid if you have a decent amount of creatures, right? You can go, boom, I have an indestructibility counter. Now all of my creatures have an indestructibility counter. Double strike, first strike, trample, whatever it is. Obviously, with these put counters on other permanent style things, indestructibility is going to be one of the biggest ones that people go for, right? Clearly, it's a very powerful move to go, all my dudes are indestructible. In the artwork, you can see a number of individuals who are arrayed in front of the broker's like gigantic symbol in the background there, the family insignia. You can see a whole bunch of people just being, basically they're behind what looks like 2 broker agents who are raising up this big shield. So at this point, this would be like they have just signed the contract agreeing to take your help. And what the brokers do is they essentially wipe your mind so that you forget all about the magic that was used to control your mind, because they have a doomsday prophecy and they're ultimately working to try and save the world of New Capenna. And actually, Falco, the leader of the brokers, has some real issues with how he's trying to save the world. So he literally grooms another person to be his conscience to help keep him in check, which I personally think is a really amazing concept. And I covered that short story over on Fantasy Geographic. So if you'd like to hear the entirety of it, I will leave a link on the screen at the end of this video. Now, let's move on to another Broker's card. This is Broker's Confluence. 1 blue, 1 white, 1 green, and 2 gets you an instant that says choose 3. You may choose the same mode more than once, which means you can do 3 times one of these, 2 times one, 1 times the other. You can combine them any way you want, as long as you're doing a total of the things listed on this card 3 times. So you can proliferate. If you don't know what proliferate is, that is put a counter on cards that already have counters of a type that's already there. So if you had creatures out that have +1/+1 counter and death touch, when you went to proliferate, you would choose which one of those counters you wanted to proliferate, unless they've updated the wording to say all counters, which they may have done. Either way, proliferate in essence allows you to increase the amount of counters that you have on cards that already have counters. So you can proliferate up to 3 times if you want to. You can phase out a creature. The second ability is target creature phases out, so you can choose that 3 times if you want. You can counter target activated or triggered ability. You could choose that 3 times if you want, although there being that many activated or triggered abilities on the stack at the same time seems highly unlikely. This is a pretty versatile spell. The fact that you can stop activated or triggered abilities, you can go, okay, I'm going to stop that ability, and at the same time, I'm going to phase out that guy and proliferate my dudes. Or I'm going to proliferate twice while countering that ability. Or I'm going to phase out your 2 biggest guys while growing mine. Like, there is a lot you can do with this. The casting cost on it is steep, which makes you feel a little bit hesitant. But remember as well, this is for Commander, right? So bigger casting costs is going to make a bigger difference. And being able to remove creatures, like phasing them out for a bit, I feel like is going to be more impactful overall because people have bigger and more important creatures too. You can just phase out your opponent's commander for a turn. Oh, did you need your commander? Well, tough luck, son. You know, that kind of a setup. Now, it's interesting because if you guys didn't know, the way that they break down abilities and colors in the casting cost, they correspond. So if you look at the green, white, blue sequencing of the casting cost, the 3 modes on Broker's Confluence should follow that pattern. So green is aligned with proliferate, blue is aligned with the bottom ability, counter target activated or triggered ability. The most interesting for me is white being aligned with target creature phasing out, because phasing is something that has just really come back to Magic in recent times. And originally, phasing was purely the domain of blue. But now we see things in white like Teferi's Protection, where you can phase out a ton of permanents, and blue did have that Teferi that did phasing, but it almost feels like phasing is being considered as white's primary ability, and blue has it as a secondary ability. So seeing it keyed here that way kind of gives you that subtle clue into what's going on if you know what to look for. Now, let's move on to the Angelic Sleuth. 1 white and 2 gets you a 2/3 flyer. Whenever another permanent you control leaves the battlefield, if it had counters on it, investigate. So I like this conceptually as an angel who, whenever you lose a permanent, the angel's like, I'm on it, boss. I'm going to figure out what's going on. I found a clue as to where your thing went. Just always finding clues. Doesn't matter what happened, where it went. Sometimes that's got to be annoying. Hey, boss, I figured out what happened to your lunch. Yeah, I ate it and I threw it in the trash. Here's a clue. I brought you part of the sandwich back. It's like, oh, Lord, you're too good at this job. Stop it. You know, the idea behind it is fun to me. But I will admit on another side that I find it annoying to see angel cards in Capenna when they told us all the angels are gone. There's no angels, so where does this angel come from? Do you know what I mean? It's a flavor quibble, but overall, whatever. I mean, you got the angel hanging there above the city making notes. Okay, I found a little bit of the sandwich. I found a little bit of tomato. But wait, he doesn't eat tomato. That can't be part of it. You know, it's silly to me. Now, next up, we've got Family's Favor, an interesting green card. 1 green and 2 gets you an enchantment that says, whenever you attack, put a shield counter on target attacking creature. Until end of turn, it gains, whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, remove a shield counter from it. If you do, draw a card. So, it gives shield counters, but it's designed in a way to not really let you build up those shield counters. Yeah, you can if you find ways to work around it and maneuver, but ultimately, the way it's going to work is you're going to swing with an attacking creature, you're going to put a shield counter on it, and it's almost guaranteed to lose that shield counter, either through engaging in combat with an opponent's blocking creature, in which case when the opponent's blocking creature went to deal damage to it, the creature would lose the shield, and if it doesn't, in that case, unless it's being blocked by a 0 power creature, most likely your creature has actually just gone through unblocked, and as soon as it connects with the opponent, then it loses the shield counter. And that does balance out the power level of this, because if it could just crank shield counters across your cards with no real sort of restriction on them to get rid of them if the creatures get through, it could just make it too easy to make all your guys super protected and untargetable. You gotta, well, they're targetable, but it busts the shield off and you get nowhere, right? It's that kind of obnoxiousness. I don't know. Wait, actually, no, never mind. Am I saying the wrong thing? Shield is destroyed or damaged, right? Not targeted. Never mind. I'm getting it a little bit twisted here. So I'm giving shield counters a little bit too much power. You can still target them, but any kind of like damaging spells or board wipes that aren't, board wipes as well, wraths and stuff like that, they're not going to work for you. So you've got those kind of issues. Now, let's move on to the Increasing Insanity card. The Gavel of the Righteous. This is nuts. 2 mana artifact. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put a charge counter on Gavel of the Righteous. So every turn during your combat, this thing is going to boost. First turn you put it out, it gets a counter on it. Equipped creature has +1/+1 for each counter on Gavel of the Righteous. As long as Gavel of the Righteous has 4 or more counters on it, equipped creature has double strike. And you equip it by paying 3 or removing a counter from Gavel of the Righteous. The fact that it literally just cranks every turn, another counter on it, another counter on it, another counter on it. Oh, there's 4? Yeah, it's double strike. And it's only 3 to equip it, or just go ahead and go, you know what, I'll take 1 counter off it. This is absolutely monstrous and satisfying. It gets filled with your righteous rage and becomes more and more powerful. I dig this very much. I can't wait to get it in my cube. It seems like it's going to be absolute bonkersness. You know, like you leave it on the board. If the game ain't flowing fast and this just sits on the table, it gets more and more powerful. You got 6 counters sitting on this thing and you drop like a 1/1 haste boy out? Boom. Look at it. Oh, I'll just go ahead and equip it. Look, he's a 7/7 double striker. 14 coming at you. I mean, yes, it's not maybe as intimidating in Commander, but man, that is impressive and I love it. So, anyhow, that wraps up all the spoilers. Links on the screen for more content if you'd like to see it. Big shout out to my patrons, and I will see you all, my friends, for the next video.